And they would have known, of course, the politics of the time. And Matthew was trying to say to them, see, Jesus was in many ways like John. And you all believed him to be a prophet. And I'm telling you that this Jesus was not only a prophet, but more than a prophet. He was the Messiah. Because look at all the other things that happened. But you have to start from first principles, and the first principles were those which were introduced through the life of John the Baptist. Because if there hadn't been the baptism, there wouldn't be Jesus' mission. And if there weren't Jesus' mission, there wouldn't be the crucifixion and the resurrection. So Matthew is saying it all stems from John. And they were cousins anyway. Right? So we're giving a lot of background into what actually, before what happened, which was there was a party. Now, apparently, according to Josephus, Herod Antipas was a real party animal. He really liked to throw parties. And when you see in Mark, in Mark 6, it says in 21, it says, Mark 6, verse 21, right? Say certain days came to pass that it was, they talk about Herod's birthday, and he invites everybody in town, including, by the way, the equivalent of the cohort of the guard, and all the important people in Galilee. Right. So when for him a party was an important an important event to show himself off and to gain political support. I don't know if any one of you remember the original Ghostbusters movie, where Rick Moranis says, "I'm having this party." He says, "I didn't invite any friends because I wanted to take it off my income tax." But he says, "I'd like you to come to my party anyway." Well, that was Herod's party. I mean, these people were friends. They were ways that he could consolidate and perhaps increase his power. And so, but that makes it interesting because parties are important in the New Testament. There are a lot of parties. You look at John, 2nd chapter of John. The first chapter, of course, is all the philosophical basis for Jesus. The 2nd chapter, first line. There was a wedding at Cana, and Jesus and his disciples were there. They were having a party. One of the things that Matthew, I think, is trying to do here is to make a contrast between the parties that Jesus and his disciples went to. Yeah, maybe they were brought in there because they were considered important people, but they were also invited because they were friends. And everybody knew everybody. It wasn't that the bridegroom felt it was necessary to curry favor with Jesus and his disciples, particularly since Jesus hasn't really made any signs yet. This is, as John says, the first sign. It's just that, these were people that were kind of known, and it was worthwhile to invite them, and you kind of knew them anyway.
Well, it was free food.
And it was free food. And, as we know later, wine. And so in any event, there's another comparison with if you look back at 14, Matthew 14:13, right following this, and also right following in Mark 6:30, is the story of the feeding of the 5,000, which was a big party, but was hardly the sort of thing that Herod was doing. These people were powerless. These people they were following Jesus because he was important to them, that they believed he could be the Messiah, or at least an important prophet, and they were there because because they wanted to be, not because they could do him any good. And it's on much lower scale than not people, of course, but on much lower scale than Herod's. And there is also the party that Jesus talks about as a parable, where the king holds a wedding and he says, I want you guys to come to my wedding. Oh yeah, I gotta go to my farm and take a look at that. I gotta go here, so he invites people off the street to come to the wedding. And the point being, these were very unimportant people who could not do the king any good whatsoever. Perhaps I'm reading too much into it politically, but I don't think so. I think that the Matthew's readers would have picked up on that. So anyway, what happens, of course, is that he has a party for his birthday. He invites all these people. And Herodias, now Mark says it's Herodias. Matthew doesn't mention it. Another interesting point, by the way, Matthew's again was twice as long Matthew's is twice as long as Mark is twice as long as Matthew. He adds double the length and gives much more detail. Anyway, Herodias was the one who really was upset about the fact that John the Baptist said that her marriage was invalid, which it was, according to Jewish law. And so she was the one who really wanted to kill him. That's what Mark says. And so so here's where the details come in about the daughter. The daughter is not the name of the daughter is not mentioned in Matthew. It is mentioned in Josephus. And again, given the time period that we're looking at, right, Josephus' sources probably, some of them might even have been at the party. Again, you're dealing with a small country where the guy who was considered to be real tight with a possible future emperor could go and they would want to talk to him. And so the people who would have been invited to the party would have been happy to talk to Josephus. Anyway, so she's invited to dance. And it is so pleased Herod said that he said, I will give you whatever you want. Now Mark says, even to the extent of half my kingdom, which is kind of nonsense. What does somebody give a kid? Because she's probably, given the Greek word, she's probably about 12 years old, maybe 13. What's she going to be able to do with half of something the size of Galilee, right? The province. And but Mark is just trying to, Herod may have been drunk. Also that, or it just may have been exaggeration. New Testament is big on exaggeration to make a point. Doesn't mean it's false. It just means that they like it, there's a certain amount of drama, and they like to add the dramatic. You know, when they talk about the parable of the talents, the amount of money involved in the talents that they're talking about, certain talents that they were owed, that was more than the entire taxation received by the Romans from all of Judea. So we're not talking about reality here, but we are talking about dramatic license, right? And as a producer, there was a British producer who, when somebody complained about that his films weren't historically accurate, he said, "Film is not about history; it's about drama." So. The other party that I want you to remember is in Esther. When when Esther goes to the Persian king and says, "By the way, do you know what your guys are doing to my countrymen?" And he is the king says, "No." He was probably wrong too, but there is again, Matthew's readers would have remembered the party in Esther as well, in which Esther saves the Jews by her intervention, whereas this other girl, ends up getting John the Baptist killed. And John's so after Herod says after Herodias after Herod makes that rather rash statement, Matthew says has the girl, whatever her name is, Salome, we now know, make the request. In Mark, she goes to her mother and says, "What should I ask for?" And her mother says, "Oh, I got it already. I know exactly what you should ask for." The head of John the Baptist on a platter, and that is such an incredible detail, right? Again, why would you put that kind of detail in there unless it actually happened that way? That was not the usual thing that was done. But Herod was kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? Because on the one hand, he didn't want to kill John the Baptist for various reasons. On the other hand, he made this oath, and in front of all of these important people. And if he broke that oath, the next day they would talk about what a weakling he was, and that he was not a man of his word. So he reluctantly then says, "Go do it." So that's essentially the story. That John's disciples come, and although it doesn't say so, there's another way they could have done it. Ask Herod for John's body, and then they go and bury it. Again, look down a little further, and you're looking at Joseph of Arimathea asking the ruler Pontius Pilate for the body of Jesus, so that he can have him buried. Again, a lot of parallels here that are important for readers to pick up on. The New Testament, unlike the Old, is not that long, particularly the Gospels. and particularly when you take the separate stories, because so many of the stories coming from the same source are the same. So virtually everything there is important. You know, there's not a lot of extraneous detail that you kind of that you can kind of glide over and say it doesn't really matter. That's why somebody could write a commentary that is this big. You know, probably took R.T. France's entire life to write this thing. It's over 1,000 pages, and it's great. It does have great detail in it. And so but the point that I wanted to get at, because it's a story, but there were a number of points I wanted to make here. One was I did want to talk about the politics of the situation and how incredibly fraught there were, and because of the very delicate tension between the Romans and the rulers in Judea. Or in that area, and if you made a wrong step, you know, it could be a real problem. Oh, and by the way, then because Herod got involved with his brother's wife, he got into a war with his brother and ended up losing badly. So the other thing, of course, that I wanted is, of course, the parallels between John the Baptist and the things that happened to him, and Jesus and the things that happened to him. Again, stories are true. Some details may have been added, come from one to the other, to emphasize certain aspects. Other thing, of course, is we're still looking at the beginnings of Jesus' ministry. If you recall, John is in prison, and I don't know how long he was in prison, but John was in prison when his disciples come to Jesus and say, you know, John asked us to ask you, are you the one, or should we wait for another one? So we're dealing with, I think, a fairly short period of time here. So this is still kind of the beginning of Jesus' ministry. And they mentioned at the end of that chapter there, not the end of the chapter, but the end of the section, that Jesus decided to get out of town. Again, thinking if they could do this to John, you know, Herod clearly could do it to me. And of course, if you remember, Jesus gets sent to Herod too, because Pilate had heard that Jesus was from Galilee, and that wasn't part of his authority. So he said, I'm sending you to Herod, have Herod take care of you. So again, there were wheels within wheels and all these threads that connect up. And it's it's entirely logical that you could spend a lifetime writing on just, yes, I've spent an hour or so just talking about this. And it is, I didn't really get into all of the details about the Herods and what was going on in Rome and all of things. We'd be here a lot longer. There was just so much in 12 verses.
David just wrote a 20-page paper on a small part of Matthew.
Yeah, and I wrote a 50-page paper on a small part of Matthew. You know, so, just on the Greek quotations in Matthew. So, anyway, are there any questions?
They had to have drama though. They didn't have TV, they didn't have radio, they didn't have movies, so they created their own excitement.
But they also had plays.
Yeah, that's theaters.
I mean, there's a theater, there are Roman theaters, and you know.
But do you think the average person went though?
Oh yeah, a lot of people went.
Really?
Yeah. There were competitions in Greece, and everybody who was a free citizen would go to the competitions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It wasn't the elitist group.
What's that?
It wasn't the elitist group.
No, it wasn't just the elite at all. And now I don't know if the slaves went, but I do know that that the free people went because this was important. It was an important spectator sport to have all of these great dramatists compete and each one of them would write 4 plays. There would be 3 tragedies, and then there would be a comedy based on the same subject. So you get a tragedian like Aeschylus, and he would write when he wrote the Oresteia, right? When he about Agamemnon and the death of Agamemnon and the revenge that his son Orestes takes on, etc. He would have written 3 tragedies, which he did on that, and then he would have written what was called a satyr play, which was the comedy based on the same characters and the same subject. That one has disappeared. We may have 1 or 2 satyr plays, but not much. The tragedies were the ones that survived, except for ones that were written entirely as comedies, like Aristophanes. So, other questions? Okay, sounds good. Let's talk about next week. So, as I said, we will